I'm your host, Bree Wild, and this is Marquee Memories. Here we sit down with your favorite artists and talk about their top concert memories they attended as fans. Today's guests are childhood pals from Brooklyn who have been amassing fans in defying genres for decades. In the middle of an almost completely sold-out tour called The Big Show, which features 2 sets per night and a horn section, they might be giants.
Hey,
Welcome
Bree.
back to our studio.
Thank you for having us back.
What are you guys doing in LA? I know you have a couple shows next week.
We just did the Kimmel show last night. We're just hanging out at the Hotel Roosevelt.
Oh, fancy.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the first memory. The Ventures in Tokyo, 96.
John and I were doing press. I looked at our list of gigs and I realized, I don't remember this very clearly, but we were apparently in Japan only doing press because there were no gigs.
That is some big-time rock music stuff.
We used to be ambitious, apparently. So we had a night off and we found out that the Ventures, the instrumental guitar band from the 60s, were still around and were playing a show in Tokyo. Wasn't a problem getting tickets. I think we took the Yamanote line, the subway, to get to the place.
Just for people who weren't born in the previous century, the Ventures really are the real-life encapsulation of the Spinal Tap big in Japan joke.
Yeah.
They're like the actual band. Because they did instrumentals, they weren't held, there's no language barrier, and Japanese people just loved their instrumentals.
Yes. And then they took it further because they all married Japanese wives and learned to speak Japanese. So we went and saw this American band and they were saying stuff in Japanese, and it was apparently a very emotional show for the audience because they had been living in Japan for decades. And the former drummer had just passed away. So I don't know if you remember, there was a little shrine in the lobby to the drummer, a picture of him. And I think maybe his wife and son were there, and they did a whole testimonial. And there was this outpouring of emotion amongst the Japanese fans.
Well, and the other thing I remember, when we got out of the show, it was still daylight. Which seemed very, very unrock.
Yeah.
They were essentially doing afternoon shows.
Right. Which made sense. The audience was probably the age we are now.
Yeah.
And this was back
Although
in the 90s.
I would never think of going to a show. I mean, I'm not expecting anybody doing afternoon shows for...
No matinee shows?
No.
I only go to matinee shows. Man.
Right.
I'm not up that late.
Try the early bird special. It's fantastic.
So the Ventures, how did you become fans of them? Had you seen them before this, or this was like a once-in-a-lifetime?
Well, they were, when we were kids, one of the legacy hit songs was Walk Don't Run, the instrumental guitar music.
Yeah. And they also made this great record called The Ventures in Space that I'm almost certain the B-52s had, because it is so B-52s-like. I mean, there are songs on it that you just think like, are they going to start singing Rock Lobster now? Like, it's this very... And there's even like a female vocalist on the record just going like, doing like the Star Trek lady thing. It's a great record. It's really worth checking out.
Any other specific moments from the show? Anything you were looking forward to specifically that you were like, that's my moment?
I mean, that show was more just kind of its own UFO of an experience.
We didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
But they did talk about what they described as their ticky guitar technique. So we were a little bit schooled in like their version of what it was they were getting up to, which I don't think we would have anticipated.
What was that, if you don't mind?
It's it involves a very bright, clean guitar sound with lots of reverb. And if you hear Walk Don't Run, you completely get the picture.
It's like surf rock. It sounds sort of like surfy.
Yeah.
You hear the splash of the reverb.
And then obviously you haven't seen the Ventures since.
No, I don't know how many of the Ventures are still alive.
I think they're all gone now. Actually, that was the impression I got. And I think there's still a Ventures, but it's none of the original guys are left.
We're not the original guys.
And what did you take away? Like, is there anything you saw in their show that you were like, we're going to take that and make it ours?
To be perfectly honest, I think like one of the things we sort of take measure of like the good part and the bad part. Any band can have a bad night. I mean, that's one thing. But also like there's sort of presentation things that are sort of pitfalls. We have friends who are in bands who like refuse to do encores, and to me personally, I just think like if people are expecting something as basic as an encore, that's just the way it is. You know, like if you want people to not like you, like that can be accomplished. I don't know. One of the other shows we were talking about, I saw Elvis Costello, essentially his first public performance. He played at the CBS record convention in the summer of 1977. I went to England.
Elvis Costello, Nashville Room in London, 1977.
I saw him at the Nashville Room, which is this tiny venue, and there's probably 200 people there. I was like the first person there. His record hadn't even come out. He had one 7-inch single that I had purchased, but I didn't own a record player, and because I was traveling. So I saw this show, and it really was a kind of a Star is Born show. He played Allison. He was probably 22 years old, and he had a wedding ring on, which I found profoundly mysterious. You know, it was just like, wow, he's like 22 years old, and he's like super married. Like, that's so different. He had this very angry young man quality within the songs. Like, he seemed very profoundly hurt and kind of damaged. And then the songs would end, and the room would explode in applause because everyone is like, this guy is so great. This guy's amazing. And he would just like smile and like break out of it. And it was like this really celebratory, fantastic, interesting, very singular kind of performance.
You learn something about how to perform, which is you're pouring your performance into the song, and then it's almost like you break character at the end.
Yeah. I wrote back to all my friends saying like, I just saw this guy, is going to blow your mind. Everybody's going to be talking about this guy. His name is Elvis Costello. I know that's a crazy name for a guy in a band, but it's like he's really, really good. His band's really good. They were really tight musically, like at a time when a lot of bands were just people who had sort of huddled together and figured out how to, bash out a song. His band was like extremely real on a musical level.
That was the Attractions.
It was the Attractions.
Yeah.
Although I think they'd only been together for like a week and a half. I mean, they just were very good players. I never thought about Elvis Costello's voice being like an obstacle or like a barrier to entry. But I do remember leaving, and a couple of the people that we saw the show with were like, I don't know about his voice. Another thing that kind of informs you, like you just realize people have want very different things from shows.
And what about Elvis Costello? Did you see him any other time after that?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Oh, we opened for
Seen him
Elvis
a million
Costello.
times. That's right, at the Beacon Theater.
For like a week.
We did like 5 shows.
He's a super nice guy, and he's very like a easy, interesting person to hang out with, and a huge like music fan. Like it's, I think his interest in music is very broad. So it's just if you're into music, it's just like there's no end to what you can hang out and talk about.
Yeah. But he also wanted to talk about movies and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
I recall,
Yeah.
He was not just a musician.
Nice.
Interested in culture.
A good conversationalist as well.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, how about we talk about the Contrast show?
We did a bunch of shows with a very unlikely headliner, Hootie and the Blowfish. We were the opening act because apparently they were fans. And they covered one of our songs.
Yeah, in their arena rock show, they covered which song did they cover?
Was it Twisting? Twisting in the Wind.
Does that mean you're not allowed to play that during your set then?
It was not discussed.
Yeah. I don't think we were planning on it, as I recall. But we got to hear their version of it. It was the tour after their biggest explosive mega tour. So they were still playing in these enormous rooms, the likes of which we'd never even entered. And one of them was the Toronto Sky Dome. Our experience was we were driving to Toronto, and before we got to Toronto, you could see the Sky Dome. It was a big thing on the horizon, and we just kept driving towards it. And then finally, a door opened in the side of the Sky Dome, and we drove into it. And then we drove around inside the Sky Dome until we got to where the dressing room was. It was a spaceship, basically, that we were entering. The audience was pretty much non-existent when we did our set.
Yeah, well, like the Elvis Costello show, they do. If you're opening for a really big band, you are kind of the buffer between the room being empty and the room being full. So you kind of have to get over yourself on a certain level.
Because it takes forever to load people in. It's just going to take forever.
Which no one ever tells you, by the way. I mean,
no one braces you for that.
Yeah, just advice for bands out there. If you're opening for somebody really big, be aware that you're going to start your set and there's not going to be anybody there. Don't open your show
with your
single.
head. Yeah. But the reason that we bring it up is that we were the opener, so we got to basically finish up, and it was still daytime when we finished. We heard that Los Lobos were playing in Toronto later that evening, so we basically walked, I think, just like a couple blocks from the Sky Dome to the little tiny room where Los Lobos, it was like a little bar.
We were like 3 feet away from them. It was, they had already had hits, and everybody knew who Los Lobos were. It was really a bar. I mean, it was people drinking beers and watching Los Lobos.
I had the impression, this might not be right, but I thought maybe their thing was an after show as well, like that they had already played the big show, and then they
decided to
had
roll
moved
up
to a little bar,
Yeah.
and they were playing a much crazier show in the little room, like way more psychedelic. This was the period when they had been doing the Latin Playboys kind of psychedelic Latin music.
That was like a jam band.
Yeah.
And it was great. I mean, they were really good at it. And
it was super fun.
They believe in that stuff.
Yeah.
So far, the shows have been, you're in town, you find out another show is there. Do you got any more of those on your list?
We could also talk about seeing Frank Zappa.
Sure.
That was the worst sounding show I ever went to.
Frank Zappa at the Orpheum in Boston, 1973.
I think we procured the very worst seats in the house.
Teenagers,
Yeah, it was like a Zoot Allures era band. They had the super flashy drummer.
Right.
And
Terry Bozzio.
Yeah. It was interesting how the span of stuff he did, I thought was really respectful of his audience, because he did songs from Freak Out. He really actually did his full career in this very generous way and in kind of a progressive way, which I was not expecting at all. He started in the mid 60s at a very different time than we were seeing him. Like, this was a post Rolling Stone magazine, post rock culture. Everybody was just kind of doing contemporary stuff. And the fact that he, really embraced his whole career, it was just so satisfying as a fan. It wasn't a greatest hits show. It wasn't like he was doing medleys, but he was respectful of the fact that, like, he had a bunch of different kinds of music.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, he wasn't just playing his current stuff.
And it was a really musical show too. I mean, it was like they reinterpreted everything they did, right. So it was good. He just took advantage of the musicality that was available to him, and he wasn't just trying to reproduce the original arrangements. Okay. Yeah, got it. Which, I mean, I guess for some people it could be hit or miss. I don't know, but I thought it was really smart.
So you saw a show that didn't sound good. Did you see one that did sound good?
Well, I think John was always a little more attentive to the sound quality, and I think I was probably not paying as close attention, same as today. I think the first big rock show I ever went to was Frank Zappa in 1974. I was 14, I think, at that time. Or it might have been 73. This is completely brand new experience for me as a young teen. And I was a big Frank Zappa fan at that age. So it was just exciting to be in a room watching him. But yeah, probably the sound quality was not terrific.
But I guess you wouldn't really know that at your first show.
No, you wouldn't. Yeah. I'm sure I did.
Yeah.
I'm sure I didn't. And the thing that actually stuck with me was he was still recovering from an accident he'd had where somebody pushed him off the stage like a couple of years earlier, and he had this really severe back injury. He was in a wheelchair for like a year. When I saw him, he came out, he was standing up and walking around. But during the show, this huge piece of lighting equipment fell from the ceiling of the Orpheum Theater in Boston onto the stage. And it was just like an example of how fraught everything was at that time. Like, for us, it was like, whoa, that was crazy.
Did he keep on doing the show?
He went off stage and obviously was screaming at people like he would. But no, and then he came back and finished the show, and some of the gear was damaged. Like, there's a woman playing a xylophone, and the thing just landed right on her.
Because just between you and me, John, if the lighting rig falls on the stage, like, I'm not coming back.
Yeah. I would think, I was just talking to somebody about that Curtis Mayfield show in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Where he was permanently paralyzed by exactly that. The lighting gear fell down on him.
Well, it was outdoors, so it was like a really treacherous.
Yeah.
Like I guess a storm came in. But John, I have to ask you, because I know you saw it, and we haven't really ever talked much about it, but you saw AC/DC.
Yes.
With their original singer.
That's right.
The guy before the other guy.
I can tell you the date.
At like the Paradise
in Boston. Club in Boston.
Which is like a club that's the size of my hand.
AC/DC, Paradise Club, Boston, 1978.
Angus Young was probably like not much older than me. I think he was 17 or something.
Velvet pants.
It was one of those very early wireless guitars.
Oh, right.
So I think, unless he had an incredibly long guitar cord, because he wandered all around the admittedly small club.
Well, very wide, crazy.
Very wide but shallow room, playing guitar, and the entire time, whipping his hair up and down for the whole show. Like he never stopped. He was doing something that if I did now, I would have basically a back injury that would take me out of commission forever. I'd be done. That was very impressive. Like, that was like, right at their kind of like their big moment early on where they were exploding out of the.
Was it hard to get into that show then?
I don't recall. John and I had this close friend who was sort of the source of a lot of musical information that we were getting at that time. He was this guy, Jimmy Mack, was a really dedicated music fan, introduced everything to us at that time. And he brought me to the AC/DC gig.
He worked at WBCN, which was like the big radio station, so he could get into like almost any show. So we were just this happy plus one.
Nice.
Yeah, and he just knew everything. Basically wrote half the school newspaper, and half of that was music reviews. He's probably half the reason we're here now is that he was just such an incredible music lover.
So was it loud?
No, I don't. Again,
it didn't seem too loud.
I don't remember. I don't
because you were already at that point. You had already been in bands. So.
Yeah. I don't have a memory of it being excruciatingly loud. I remember some shows that I saw, like seeing Sugar, for example. That was a show that was memorably loud. Like
Bob Mould of Husker Du's follow-up band was called Sugar, and they were insane,
really loud.
When I remember seeing Sugar in San Francisco, the lights started dimming that the show was going to start, and you could just see every single person in the audience lifting their hands to their ears. It was really great. I was trying to think of the loudest shows I've seen. Like the Ramones, actually, I mean, maybe it's like a cliche, but the first time I saw the Ramones was really like one of the loudest shows I ever saw. I mean, it was shocking to me. Probably the loudest show I ever saw was Mission of Burma. I ended up joining like half the audience in the parking lot. We were still there to hear the music, but we just couldn't. It was just this.
That's very funny. I think I did the same thing.
Wave of sound.
I remember they played the In Square Men's Bar, and I stood out on the sidewalk.
Right,
and it was very comfortable. The volume was like you could hear everything, but you just weren't being deafened.
Did you guys ever play that loud?
After the Tony Mamoni,
the sort of the post grunge moment, things got very loud. It was before the era of in-ear monitors, so there was just like the stage volume went up, the drummer got louder, and then all of a sudden the amps got louder, and it was just this vicious cycle. I don't think it was a terrible idea.
We got it under control,
many
decades ago, and now it's very civilized on stage now. It's like.
What about the switcheroo shows? One where you were opening and then...
Yeah, we did a couple of shows where the Pixies opened for They Might Be Giants when the Pixies were... I don't think they were even signed. They were a local band in Boston, and we played in Jamaica Plain. What was the name of the place?
Green Street Station.
Green Street Station was the venue, which is, again, like just a tiny club. They were definitely like a brand new kind of loud. Later on, when Charles left the Pixies, he did a bunch of tours with us as Frank Black.
We toured France, I think.
We opened for him in France because he's big in France.
He was big in France. We were not, but we've
never been big in France. But I can tell you, just as the opener, touring in France is like the most civilized thing because after the show, the promoter is obliged to take you out to like a restaurant meal, and the restaurant is being held open after hours on your behalf.
Okay.
Which is, that is some rock star living.
Yeah, that's nice. What else is on your list?
Oh, I don't know. Let's see.
Did you want to talk about that Mekons show?
Mekons appear in New York City? 1986.
There was a sort of legendary band out of England called the Three Johns, which sort of caught our attention as we are Two Johns. They kind of morphed into this very interesting Americana-ish band called the Mekons, and they just made some great indie rock records. I was working doing graphic design for a magazine, and my boss was a huge Mekons fan and told me that they were doing this gig at the end of a pier. I don't know. There were these shows in New York City. I think they were publicly sponsored, and somehow they had like gotten a night. And so we went out to the end of this pier. There were very few people there, but you could sort of tell that it was like rock cognoscenti people. You know, it was all like rock critics. Everybody had their arms folded. The front man of the band, who had like a very sort of broad, big accent, was just like, we're the Mekons from Chicago, Illinois. We want to thank you all for coming to the show. If there's anybody out there, anybody from a magazine or a radio station or anybody who could help us, just fuck off. And it was funny is that he was completely reading the room properly. Like everyone was like, "We can help you, man." And it was like he was like, "We don't need it."
Wow. Where's the strangest place you've ever seen a show besides, a little bar in Toronto?
I've performed 2 shows where for the entire show someone was giving me the finger. I know I'm going to get the location wrong. Cicero's in St. Louis. In St. Louis. Back when St. Louis was a bad place for us to play.
That's right.
When you broke your wrist back in the Brooklyn moment, I had booked us a show at this place called Bedrock, which was in the basement of a strip club on Bedford Avenue in Williamsburg.
Yes.
And there was somebody there also giving me the finger for the whole show.
That was me, actually.
Who turns up to a show and does that?
Well, the weird thing is with the Cicero's guy, at the end of the night, when we were packing our stuff into the car, he was like, he wanted to buy a T-shirt, I think.
He was a huge fan.
He just didn't know how to express it.
He wanted to show us how much he loved us, so he was flipping us off during the show, which we didn't understand how things worked in St. Louis.
It's the language of punk rock.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very 14, how does a 14-year-old boy express his love for something greater than flipping it the bird for the entire show? But it was very distracting.
Well, you told me one of your first shows. What was one of your first shows?
Right. I saw a rock band called the Eternal Lights at a temple. They did a rock version of If I Had a Hammer.
Nice.
And they seemed very loud at the time, but I was really young. The Zappa show was actually really one of my first shows. I saw Pete Seeger outside in Harvard Square. Now that people have seen the Bob Dylan movie, you can say Pete Seeger and people might know what you're talking about. And I saw Joan Baez also outside in Cambridge, Massachusetts, when in the 60s. She was like a local artist then.
You guys seem to have a lot of fun when you're touring. Just play whatever you want. Do whatever you want. Where do you think you picked that up from? Did you see somebody on stage and think like...
That's a great question. In New York, when we were still kind of forming this thing, we went and saw a band called Brave Combo. And the really striking thing about this band was that they engaged the audience in a way that was probably considered uncool at the time. They did a thing where they played polkas and stuff, but in a rock genre. And they got the entire audience to form a conga line. That was kind of a moment where like, oh yeah, like people want to actually enjoy the show. Like they're there to have fun. Because at that time, the whole deal was you'd go to a show in New York and everybody had their arms folded. And
you had to be cool.
You had to be cool. And it was the most uncool, fun thing I think we'd seen. And was that at the Danceteria? I can't remember.
Or it might have been at Irving Plaza.
Irving Plaza, one of those places.
But it was they were great. They were really a profoundly good band.
You guys have made a couple of kids albums. Have you ever played for kids?
Oh, yes.
Yes, we played for kids.
What are kids like at a show?
Kids are terrible. We realized very quickly that our confetti cannon was the star of our kids' show. That was the part of the show that people really liked. If we were smart about it, we would have brought 2.
Yeah. No, kids are not worried if you are not feeling appreciated. They're it's the toughest room you can imagine. Like it is, kids are impossible, basically.
Because they're not really watching. They're just like, play what I know, right?
They're not even watching.
They're barely even, they're not facing the stage. They're talking to each other.
They're looking for their mom. My big takeaway from doing a bunch of kids shows was like, school teachers really should be paid a lot more.
I'm taking my 6-year-old to OK Go.
You have a
next week,
6-year-old?
I do.
No way.
Yeah, and he really likes OK Go. So
He's already a fan.
yes.
Oh, good.
Well, because of the videos.
Right, of course.
And then we watched all the behind the scenes for
That's
the
great.
videos. So we're going next week, and we're going to see how it goes.
Pete, our manager, was telling me that they do a question and answer thing after their show. Like, we've joked about doing question and it's like the least rock thing you could possibly
Yeah.
do. It's like, thank you very much. Let the mystery be. All right, we're out. We're going to disappear. Curtain comes down. And they come out. They set up the mics. It's like, where do you get your ideas? It's like, well,
Right.
Welcome
me,
to our TED Talk.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we live in sort of a post TED Talk culture, so everybody's used to that idea. But to me, like, as a performer, like, I don't want people to see me before. I don't want people to see me after.
You're a
Like,
mystery.
Well,
Yeah.
it creates this X factor too, where somebody might just be hostile, like say some embarrassing question.
although
like-
when we did that Q&A thing on the Joko cruise, the people asking those questions were so nice.
That's true.
Like, it actually made me think, like, I've spent like 40 years not talking to people
Yeah.
who are so appreciative of what we
Sure.
do and are so generous about
Yes,
it. Like,
yes,
it was actually
Feel bad now.
made me, yeah.
Maybe Q&As are in your future.
Turns out I've been a jerk all along.
Do you have any shows coming up as fans that you're looking forward to seeing? Or do you mostly just on the fly?
I wanted, there was a Magnetic Fields show that
Oh.
I unfortunately didn't get to book for myself. They're going around doing 69 love songs in various places. It's a 2-night thing they do because it's a lot of music. I did already see one of the 2 nights in New York. They're terrific. They're like, they're like almost as old as we are, and I think
Extraordinary.
extraordinary. They're still going and they're dedicated. And,
Yeah, why did you guys choose 2 nights for this tour?
Well, it just really helps us keep our scene together, being able to like sleep somewhere. And we spent a lot of our adult lives on tour buses and, on the floors of Ford Econoline vans.
Done that.
And we changed the show up pretty radically from one night to the next. I mean, we're doing 3 nights in San Francisco, and they'll basically be unique programs each night. And that gives us a chance to sort of challenge ourselves musically. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of seeing a band at the beginning of a tour and then at the end of the same tour, but it's like this thing where the first show is like this very fresh as a daisy kind of thing. And then I think, it's very healthy to not do the same show every night. You really got to change it up.
we had an album in the can, and we don't even have a plan at this point to put it out. So,
Okay.
but we can come back. And
Yeah,
talk
we're keeping the
There you
mystery
go.
going.
You can just come back.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for your time.